Yeah, hey everybody, Steve here from The Buried Life. Having trouble with the protein shake. Today's video, as I was doom scrolling the social media and watching reels and videos, actually I was looking at stuff dealing with 3D printing and laser engraving, and then what popped up in my feed was some fitness stuff. And since today is going to be the workout day, today's going to be chest and back. I do 3 workouts a week, and I kind of disagree with this guy, and to some extent, but more glaring than that are the people that tell you how to make muscle and how to build muscle, these fitness influencers, and they have no muscle. And well, let's just get to it. I want to show you this guy right here. Here is this guy, Harrison Thompson, and this video will get you to a place of where you're just like scratching your head and you're looking at him, and he says, this is a massive warning. Don't do these certain things if you want to gain muscle, and if you want to gain muscle, then you have to do this thing that he's talking about. Now, automatically glaring right here at the very beginning of this reel, what we ended up seeing here is something really strange. Now, most people that don't go to the gym probably don't know what's going on here, but this machine that he's on is a prone hamstring curl, leg curl machine thing, and he's doing it with his arm. He's in a gym that probably has every machine imaginable for every body part, and it just kind of goes downhill. This is a case of somebody who desperately wants to be a fitness influencer, and he is. But the problem is he's telling you how to build muscle, and he doesn't have muscle himself. So,
warning if you're still doing 12 reps. Most people in the gym make this mistake. Don't be one of them. The more reps that you do in a set, the more fatigue that you generate. And since the only important reps are the ones that are close to failure, you're wasting a lot of time and energy on the reps that do fuck all. So,
do you have any studies proving this? No, he doesn't.
Increase the weight, but only do 4 to 8 reps. And as soon as you can do 8 reps, increase the weight again. This is a massive warning if you're still doing 12 reps.
Yeah, besides the fact that we get to the point of where he's doing a curl on the leg curl machine and he doesn't have a lot of muscle to begin with, some of the stuff that he says, 4 to 8 reps. See, the problem is that the lower in reps that you go to failure, the more strength you're going to build. And so anywhere from like 1 to 3 repetitions, what you're looking at is you're going to be developing power. So we're talking about power lifters and probably the stuff that most people don't get involved in. Now, any type of resistance training, you're going to get some strength gains and some hypertrophy gains. And there's the missing component that he doesn't even touch on, which he should, is nutrition, is increased protein intake. But that aside, he's talking about only do 4 to 8 repetitions because basically that'll get the most bang for your buck. Anything above that, higher repetitions, it's only the ones that are close to failure are worth anything, and the other ones are, fuck all, he says. There's a problem with that because studies have been done and show that that's not actually the case. Besides the fact that you have spaghetti arms, and in doing exercises on machines that were meant for your legs. Resistance is resistance, I understand that, but we're going to talk a little bit more about this. Let's take a look at some stuff here. So here we go. We're going to take a look at some stuff here. And we're just going to go over a handful of studies, not very many. And this one here, this is gross measures of exercise-induced muscular hypertrophy. And anyway, to compare several indices in which that might be used to depict muscle size. So it goes through and it talks about they have 4 groups of men. You have a group of men here, shows the age, they're exposed to conditions and 21 sessions of squat training. 3 of the groups performed 4 sets of multiple repetitions. Group 1, you had 3 to 5 reps, and then you had Group 2, which is 13 to 15 reps, and then Group 3 that did 25 to 30 reps. Control group didn't do any physical training, so they just got to sit around and eat chips and whatever. The tests used to represent muscle size included body weight, girth, size, net girth, quadriceps femoris, hamstring thickness, and they also did testing with ultrasound. Now, the results differed from the three dependent variables, and thigh girth was greater in group 2, and group 2 was the one that had 13 to 15 reps. And group 3 then, which did 25 or 23 to 25 reps. And then group C, which was a control group that didn't do any physical training. So what we end up seeing here is that, he's saying only do 4 to 8 repetitions. Well, if that was the case, then we would see some equivalent or close to girth size in the thigh as you did with group 2 and group 3, but we don't. And so that's why I got to call bullshit on this guy, besides the glaring fact that he has no arms. Now, this is talking about squat training, but this still carries on into other muscle groups. So we're going to take a look at this one here. Total number of sets as a training volume quantification method for muscle hypertrophy, a systematic review. Now, systematic review goes over a number of studies. In other words, it's just not one study. They go over a number of studies, and it holds more weight than a single study. So they went through literature after analyzing 2,585 articles and studies. They go through studies were randomized controlled trials that have total number of sets, a rep range, frequency training that lasted at least 6 weeks. Subjects had a minimum of 1 year of resistance training and between the ages of 18 and 35. I'm going to be 58 in a few days, but, still a lot of this applies. Excuse me. And anyway, it goes through, and it's interesting because they talk about all this stuff that they did with all of these things, talking about the age and of the participants, the physiology. They did, the study, the groups, the weeks, the days. And what's interesting is that you have high volume, 10 by 10. You talk about 5 by 10, 3 by 20, for 6 weeks and 12 weeks. And there's no significant differences between the group and similar size effects. Pretty much is what we see across the board. So what we end up seeing is that there were studies that were done, and if what he was saying was true, to only do 4 to 8 repetitions will give you the most hypertrophy and muscle growth, then we wouldn't see getting the same results with the high rep group as we would with a lower rep group. But there have been studies that have been done showing that if you do the lower rep ranges, you will have increases in strength and not necessarily in hypertrophy. So there are other studies that actually show from 8 to 12 repetitions is considered the hypertrophy zone, which is best. You'll get obviously some strength increase, but it'll be more towards hypertrophy. And again, the unknown that isn't talked about by this skinny armed dude that we have here, Mr. Skinny Guy who uses the wrong machine, is that what he ends up doing, he doesn't talk about protein intake. And you can do 4 to 8 repetitions. You could do 8 to 12. You can do, even up to 15 and 20 repetitions for doing multiple sets. If you're not eating properly and don't have good carb intake, don't have increased protein for trying to gain muscle mass, you're not going to gain it. It's kind of like saying, hey, I want you to build a brick house and here's the mortar and here's the rebar, but I'm not going to give you any bricks. Bricks being the protein or giving you a limited amount of protein. You're not going to be able to finish the house. So it's fuck all by saying only do 4 to 8 reps. If you're not eating enough protein, 4 to 8 reps doesn't really make a difference. You'll just lose some body weight, and you could even lose muscle mass if you don't have good protein intake. Apparently, he's not eating enough protein, or I would dare say he's not even going to failure because of the size that he is. So anyway, this is interesting. Another study by Schoenfeld compared 2 programs of classic hypertrophy scheme with 3 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions was used in one group and in a daily undulating scheme of 3 sets of 2 to 4, 3 sets of 8 to 12, and 20 to 30 reps in another one. And anyway, the volume load was significantly higher in the constant repetitions group, although no significant difference in muscle mass were found between the groups. However, when looking at the effect sizes, the undulating program was superior for extensors and flexors and respectively moderate effect. When compared with the constant group, they had a smaller effect. And then it goes through and it talks about, 2 to 4 repetitions, and again, versus 3 versus 8 to 12 repetitions during an 8-week training protocol. Again, we see there was thickness, the variable load being higher in the moderate load groups. However, no significant differences in muscle thickness, although the moderate load groups induced a higher effect size. So anyway, you go through, and then you have high load groups, you have low load groups, and all of this stuff that comes into play. And what's interesting is that it seems that volume seems to drive hypertrophy. Okay, that's just the way it is. A recent meta-analysis comparing low and high loads reported the muscle gains were similar independently of rep range and external load. Yet in most studies, the authors described the low repetition protocols a range of 6 to 12 repetitions. In these cases, the present review suggests that the total number of sets to quantify volume training is more accurate when the rep range lies between 6 to 20 repetitions than when it lies below 6 repetitions. So, yeah, what we're ended up seeing is, a rep range of 6 to 20 repetitions. And the whole thing about this guy saying, if you do more, you're going to get more fatigued, he totally ignores the fact that there's rest periods between sets. And there's other studies that talk about, the difference between having like 60 seconds between sets versus 1 to 2 minutes versus 2 to 3 or 4 minutes between sets, where you can regain and you can recover from that fatigue, which allows you to go back and do more sets, do more reps, and get a more hypertrophic response in regards to your training. In other words, you're going to build some more muscle. This is really interesting because if you get to a place where there's a plateau in your training and you're doing, let's say, 6 to 12 repetitions, and you're doing progressive overload, you're doing the nutrition thing, but you've reached a plateau, one of the things that you can do is to go down, probably go down in weight and increase the number of repetitions to take advantage of that. And what I have personally found is that I can get past those plateaus by doing higher repetitions. Granted, I do more rest between the sets to allow me to recover CNS, get over the fatigue, and I'm able to put more effort and put more tension and obviously more volume load onto the muscles that I'm working, which results in more hypertrophy. But then again, the same thing could be said for power training and strength training. They have shown that, especially during power training and strength training, but power training even more, is that the longer the less rest period between your sets, the more strength gains that you're going to get because you're able to recover, let the muscles recover, your central nervous system recover. You get more training, more gains in that aspect of power and strength. So, yeah, when you got this guy here and he's, that's a back exercise. I'm not sure why he's doing a back exercise when he's talking about arms. Now he's doing arms, and which is all right. And there's his tiny weights with his tiny arms. He's talking about increase the reps, but only do 4 to 8 repetitions, and then increase the weight again. And as soon as if you get to where you're doing, it's just this whole, I guess you call it rinse and repeat type thing. But the only important ones are the ones that are close to failure. That's absolutely not true. That's not what studies show. And so, especially when you have guys like him that have the tiny spaghetti arms and, they're doing exercises on these weird machines. It just doesn't make sense. So anyway, it's interesting that we come up and we see that this total number that for training for volume and this range of 6 to 20 repetitions for hypertrophy comes into play. Now, when you start reading more and more studies, it's very interesting when you get into them. In this one here, the effects of low versus high load resistance training on muscle and strength and hypertrophy in well-trained men by Schoenfeld is really interesting as well. It goes in here, and let me see if I can find it. 18 young men experienced in resistance training were matched according to baseline strength and randomly assigned to one of two experimental groups. A low load resistance training where 25 to 35 repetitions were performed per set, or a high load where 8 to 12 repetitions were performed per set. In other words, they had heavier weights, but they only did 8 to 12 repetitions. During each session, subjects in both groups performed 3 sets of 7 different exercises representing all the major muscle groups. Training was performed 3 times a week on non-consecutive days, so they had a good amount of rest period for a total of 8 weeks. Both the high load and low load conditions produced significant increases in thickness for elbow flexors, 5.3 versus 8.6 respectively, elbow extensors, 6.0 versus 5.2, and quads, 9.3 versus 9.5, with no significant differences noted between groups. Improvements in back squat were significantly greater for the high load compared to the low load, and there is a trend for greater increase in one repetition max bench press. Upper body muscle endurance, assessed by the bench press at 50% of 1 rep max to failure, improved to a greater extent in low load than with the high load. So these findings indicate that both high load and low load training to failure can elicit significant increases in muscle hypertrophy among well-trained men. However, high load training is superior for strength adaptation. So it's interesting that the heavier the weight that you do, the more strength gains that you're going to get. In other words, your body's going to respond to the stimulus and the resistance, and if it's heavier, you're exercising, your body's going to respond by building stronger muscles. Okay, so there's a difference between working and building muscle for hypertrophy and gains versus strength. So, but it's interesting that we see that, even with 25 to 30 repetitions, it's very, very interesting. But the thing is that people like this who are skinny and try to tell you how to build muscle and they themselves don't have muscle, it would be different if it was like, hey, join me on my journey. I'm going to do this thing where I'm going to do 4 to 8 repetitions, and we'll do it for 6 months, and we'll do it before, we'll do it after, during and after, and we'll see the results and see where that leads us. Granted, working to failure, which I have a hard time believing that he works to failure on 4 to 8 repetitions with the condition that he's in. And if he does, the next glaring thing that pops out is that obviously his nutrition is in a deficit, and he doesn't have enough protein intake. You should look at the most recent study that I saw said that 0.73 grams per pound of body weight is what you need for hypertrophy. There's other studies that talk about, and then the bodybuilders, the bros, like, oh, you need 1 gram per pound of body weight. Actually, studies have been done to show that even 0.7 to 0.73 to 0.75 is kind of that place where you're going to experience hypertrophy with that increased protein intake. So there's no need to do 1 gram per pound of body weight because according to these studies, it's probably not going to reduce, and more is always better for the average person. Now, if you're juiced up on steroids and Anavar and Test and DECA and all those things that, the Mr. Olympia people do, and Ronnie Coleman, who can't walk now without crutches and cane and wheelchairs. We're not talking about those people. And that's the thing that I like about these studies, is that these studies were done with normal people. In other words, people that don't do steroids, people that are, some are untrained, some are men, some are women, some are old, some are young, some are middle-aged, some are experienced in resistance trainings, others are not. And so what we can glean from this information is we can fine-tune our workout program to give us the best areas in which we could get on the board in regards to the goals we want to meet. And if that's hypertrophy, what we end up seeing is more like, not 4 to 8 repetitions, because that's going to give you more strength in hypertrophy. But I would generally recommend, 6 to 12 and even 15 repetitions. And then if you're really looking for more hypertrophy and you've kind of plateaued, I would skip and go with some interesting stuff. There's studies done by Schoenfeld and some others that show that 20, 25, 30, 45 sets per week, which was considered junk volume, and it was totally useless, because anything over 10 or 15 sets was deemed as being junk and useless. Actually, studies showed that there hasn't been a diminishing return. Of course, you're going to have nutrition and rest and so on and so forth. Lifter experience is going to come into play in this as well. But to say that never do more than 12 repetitions it's being disingenuous. And what he's doing is a confirmational bias in the fact that what he's doing here is just spouting some stuff that confirms what he does in a program that he's trying to sell you. He's ignoring all the other studies. So instead of looking at all the studies and saying, okay, well, let's take a look at everything, that deals with hypertrophy, and what can we glean from that? No, he's stuck on stupid as saying you should only do 4 to 8. And so he's ignoring all these other studies where you do 6, 10, 12, 20, even 30 repetitions during a set. And again, he doesn't talk about rest periods, increasing your rest periods. So I find it really disingenuous that, he's a fitness influencer and he's telling you how to build muscle when he obviously doesn't have a lot of muscle. And maybe that's because he's doing exercises on arm exercises on a leg curl machine. Yeah, you can do that, but it'd be way better. I'm not even going to get into that. It's just... So anyway, that's what we got going on. I thought that was really interesting that you have these people that are, have these skinny arms, and, they're in the gym. That is, let me see if I get this. This is why I want to post this. He talks about, let me put this here. He talks about never do 12 reps. Never, ever, ever, ever do 12 repetitions. And it's like, dude, it doesn't even look like you do more than 12 reps. And maybe if you did more than 12 reps and you actually went to failure, maybe you would experience some hypertrophy. But it's so funny that what these people will do, go on ChatGPT and they'll get a script and they'll do this thing, they'll memorize this. He's probably reading from a teleprompter. There's a number of these skinny fitness influencers that if you look real close, you can see that they're actually reading, from a teleprompter. They got a whole production thing, with the camera and the lights, and he's got the mic and the whole 9 yards. But the proof is in the pudding. You can say all the stuff you want, but if your advice on how to build muscle was really as good as it is and is supposed to be, where's the muscle? Where's the proof? I'm not seeing it. You claim, just do 4 to 8, and once then just add more weight, don't increase the number of sets, don't increase the repetitions, or just keep doing progressive overload, keep adding weight. Well, at that rep range, all you're going to be doing, especially since you're doing 4, 5, and 6, and 7, probably 4, 5, and 6 reps, is dealing more with strength gains than actual hypertrophy. But again, if you read studies, you would know that. Pretty much you're just going to increase your strength. You're not going to build muscle. And to never do 12 reps or more, I mean, you're looking at people, natural bodybuilders, even, the juice jerks, that steroid guys and the whole 9 yards, the professional bodybuilders who are juiced to the gills with everything, growth hormone and liver king people and so on and so forth, spending, tens of thousands of dollars a month on steroids. Seriously, you can get natural people that would do 15 to 20 to 30 repetitions. Matter of fact, right now, my routine is 3 days a week. And so on the first day of the week, on Monday, I will do arms. So I'll do biceps and triceps, and I throw calves in there. And then I have a day off, and then that next day that I work out, I do shoulders and legs. And I'll do cardio on every day that I work out. Then I have another rest day, and then I go back. And then the day after that is I do chest and back. And boom, I'm able to hit everything. But what I'm doing now, because I was experiencing a little bit of a plateau, is I changed my routine, and I'm still doing 3 or 4 sets or 5 sets. But what I'm doing is I'm increasing the number of repetitions, and I'm seeing some good gains. I was stuck at like 17-inch arms for the longest time, and it was like my protein was good, my nutrition was on point, my recovery and sleep was good. I'm doing everything. I'm taking creatine. I'm doing this and that. I'm, counting calories, the whole 9 yards, and I got visible abs. And I just reached a plateau. So when I started doing research and looking at more studies on hypertrophy and rep ranges and number of sets, we see that number of sets, the increase in the number of sets that you do is tied to volume. Volume is a key thing. All things else being equal, working close to failure, and your nutrition and all that is set, what we end up seeing is that more sets equals more volume, which results in more hypertrophy. And the same thing with repetitions. So the great thing about using higher repetitions is that I can still work towards failure using a weight, but not 100%. In other words, I can go down to 70% of my 1 rep max or 50% of my 1 rep max, and I can still get good hypertrophy gains while getting into these higher rep ranges, which it's like working your muscle from a different angle. I kind of equate that to doing, maybe 8 to 12 repetitions, and then you start going into the 12 to 20 repetitions. It opens up a whole new world, and it takes your muscles past a point of where they've never been before. So there's more recruitment of different muscle fibers when you get into those higher rep ranges. And again, multiple sets are always better than less. It's just a thing. Obviously, there's a point of diminishing returns, but this guy here never do anything after 12. And it's like, I used to be him. And then I started reading, and looking at studies and actually applying the things that I learned in those studies. And some of the stuff was like, I'm not feeling it. But definitely volume is a prime driver when it comes to hypertrophy. And again, if you're focused on hypertrophy, 4 to 8 reps is more geared towards strength than it is hypertrophy. So when you get into the 6, 8, and to 15 to 20 repetitions, that's where you're going to experience some more hypertrophy. And again, you're going to get some strength gains. You're going to get some hypertrophy gains with 4 to 8 repetitions. But eventually you're going to come to a place where you plateau and eventually come to a place where you can't add more weight. So you're going to be stuck. So what do? You're getting so close to your 1 rep max that you can't do any more weight. So now what do we do, Mr. Einstein? Well, what we end up doing is reducing the amount of our 1 rep max, and we can keep the number of sets the same, but we can increase the number of repetitions. And what you'll find is you'll be able to jumpstart more hypertrophy. You'll get past that plateau. Excuse me. I was talking with a guy the other day, and he was saying, hey, he goes, my nutrition's pretty good. I'm doing good on protein and so on and so forth. He says, but I've hit a plateau. And he says, how I just can't get over this plateau. And so I had him explain, well, tell me your program and what you're doing. So he explained it, and it's like, okay, that's good. And he's like, well, I'm not understanding. Am I just at my natural potential? And the answer is no. What I told him is I said, you need to stop training for hypertrophy and you need to switch to strength training. And he's like, it blew his mind. He's like, why would I do that? I'm trying to get bigger. And it's like, well, here's the deal. you've reached your strength potential of where you're at. And so you can't get any more hypertrophy gains because you're limited by the amount of strength that you have. So stop doing the hypertrophy training, and for the next, excuse me, for the next 2 or 3 months, maybe even 4 months, focus on strength training, solely on strength training. Look it up, do some strength training routine. Don't worry about the hypertrophy. Work on working on strength. And what you'll find is once you finish that strength training period of 2 or 3 months, then you go back to hypertrophy. You will be able to go past the plateau that you were in because you increased the amount of strength that you had. So now you can go back to hypertrophy, boom, and there you go. And that's what I end up doing. When I realized that little bit of knowledge and wisdom right there, boom, it made all the difference in the world in regards to building muscle. Now, I do have to admit that I get into something, I go all in, balls deep, and that's the way it is. So I am not the average person that goes to the gym 2 or 3 times a week and work out for an hour and, just want to get in shape. I want to do some cardio for heart health, and I'm not solely concentrated on strength or the goal isn't to be big and muscular. I'm that guy. I want to take things to a little bit of the extreme, and I want to test and see what works and what doesn't. And when I found some of these hacks, which aren't really hacks, they're just published information from these studies and systems and techniques for hypertrophy and things like that. I incorporated these things and said, okay, well, this didn't work for me, but this worked really well. My body responded real well to this type of technique or this type of strategy or rep range, or the time that it takes to do the repetition. It's really interesting because the time that you do the repetition can have an effect on strength and also hypertrophy. And what we found by looking at some studies, I don't have them listed here, otherwise I'd show you, but basically the amount of time that you do the repetition will also have an effect on hypertrophy and or strength. So what I've found, especially being an older person, I'm going to be 58 in a few days, is that the more explosive the movement, say I'm doing a chest press on a machine, the more explosive the movement, that is really good. That is really good for seniors. And then doing a slower negative and getting a good stretch across that muscle group, whether it's the chest or the bicep or whatever it is, excuse me. Granted, you don't want to go so heavy that you're gonna, rip a pec or a bicep or anything like that. But what ends up happening is that, boom, that works. And it's just amazing. And what I've ended up finding is that by taking a repetition and the time it takes to do the rep, maybe 1 second to push it up or a half second, and then doing a slow 4 to 6 second negative, there's some studies that have showed that produces some more hypertrophy. But if you go past 10 seconds, and I really wish I had this study, I can't remember where it's at, but there was a study that showed that if you do a repetition, anything past 10 seconds, as you start leaving the hypertrophy and you start getting into the endurance part of the muscle, which is fine if you want endurance. So if you're doing a 15 or 20 second repetition, there's nothing wrong with that. But don't say that that's going to produce more hypertrophy, because there is a point of diminishing returns where it goes from strength to hypertrophy to endurance. And what the researchers found, it was about 10 seconds in the repetition. So it's really interesting on how you can do this. Other little tricks that you can do, running the rack, starting out with a low weight and going up, or starting out with a high weight and then going down, again, working towards failure. Is a really good thing. Another one is pause reps, that you're able to pause. Another one is that, like, say you're doing a chest press. Let's get rid of the skinny arm guy because he's just so uninformed and just skinny. And I used to be him. But he will probably stay that way if he continues in the mindset that you only do 4 to 8 repetitions. So anyway, this whole thing of doing the repetition. What I found, and I don't do bench press. I haven't done bench press in about a decade, 8 years plus. I haven't done bench press. I only use machines. I do hammer strength machines. I do dumbbells. I do not do flat bench. I do not do bench incline. I do not do barbell bench decline. I only use machines, and the reason for that is that I can get with a machine. I can get more. I can put more weight on, and I don't have to worry about a spotter or killing myself if I drop the bar on my neck. It's just a thing. And so when I see people that are working out in the gym and they're doing their bench press and they get to a place where they can't do anymore because they can't get the bar up, I can go past that by using machines because I can go as heavy as I want. And then let's say if for some reason I just let go, nothing's going to happen to me. I'm going to be absolutely fine. The person with the barbell that is pushing up and he's maxed the weight and all of a sudden he lets go or he can't get the bar up. I just saw a video clip the other day where a guy was working out by himself and the bar was on his neck and he almost killed himself. And he's obviously the only one in the gym and he's filming himself. Yeah, I don't have to worry about that. So now I can get to a place of progressive overload that goes past what those people can do on a flat bench without a good spotter. And that's part of the problem is that most of these days people go to the gym, they don't have workout partners that would be able to spot for them. And the majority of people in the gym that I've seen, they wouldn't be able to spot because they can't lift the weight to begin with. It's interesting that hey, can you spot me? And I've seen people do it, and they'll grab somebody to spot them. They don't tell them how to spot. They don't ask them how much can you deadlift. That would probably be pretty important. That if you're doing 250 to 300 pounds on a bench, or trying to, and if you can't lift that weight up, it's probably not a good idea to do a spotter. But I digress. Again, the whole point of working out and exercising, and for me, is to gain more muscle mass. And that's my current stick right now. I know eventually I'll get to a place of where I will go as far as I can go, and that'll be good. And, as I get older, I've already noticed that at 255, 257 pounds, it does have an effect on my life. I still do cardio every single workout that I do for, I do 75 minutes to 150 minutes of cardio a week for heart health. But being heavy takes a toll on your joints, takes a toll on your heart. Of course, I balance that out with the cardio. But eventually, I'll tone down and chill out on the hypertrophy. But with that being said, right now, it's the higher repetitions can be good, and the higher number of sets can be good. There were studies done that showed that 27, 30, and even 45 sets per week per muscle group. I think this was talking about the triceps in this one study. There was no diminishing returns. Now, granted, there's recovery, there's lifter experience, and so on and so forth, but there wasn't a diminishing return in hypertrophy at those higher number of sets. In other words, the overall volume was still pretty damn good. Now, eventually, are you going to do 45, 50, 60 sets per week? Obviously not. The average person isn't going to do that. But what was once thought of being, 6 to 10 sets per body part per week, and, or 12, ooh, that's enough. Anything more than 10 or 12 is junk volume. That is not the case. And again, there's a lot of moving parts and variables involved. I'm talking about nutrition, talking about rest between sets, all of this stuff comes into play. So to make a blanket statement to say never do, more than 4 to 8 repetitions because you're not going to get anything else out of it when you have skinny arms tells me that you're clueless. So I just kind of wanted to go over that. Anyway, so that's the dude there. That's the dude. Yeah, Mr. Skinny Arm himself, doing curls, and that's a back workout exercise. The more reps you do in a set is more fatigue. And since the only important reps are the ones that are close to failure, you're wasting time and energy of reps that don't do fuck all. Only do 4 to 8 reps. And as soon as you can do 8 reps, increase the weight again. Yeah, massive warning. If you're still doing 2 reps, 12 reps, you're doing it wrong. It's like, what's that saying? What was that? If that's wrong, I don't want to be right. That's what it comes down to. So yeah, it's kind of hilarious on what we see from these fitness influencers, that people who obviously don't have big muscles, that don't haven't built muscle, are trying to tell you how to build muscle. And I just find that disingenuous. I just find this funny that they will pick some talking points out of some random study that was done without looking at the whole, no meta analysis, no other studies, and they pick this little thing and say, but it's all about clicks and views. Oh, I need to make content, so I just, they Google, they chat GPT, and next thing you know, boom, this is what pops up. This is easy to remember. I can't even find anything that says do 4 to 8 repetitions, to be honest with you. Let's see, do 4 to 8 reps for hypertrophy. It's not going to be a real big thing. 4 to 8 reps is for functional, where you're going to gain some strength, some speed, and some size without building too much muscle. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's kind of funny. Let's take a look at this. Let's see, where are we at here? So there it is. 4 to 8 reps is commonly used for functional hypertrophy, which is a goal of gaining strength, speed, and some size without building too much muscle. For traditional hypertrophy or building muscle, the recommended rep range is 8 to 12 sets or reps per set. Here are some other rep ranges. 1 to 5 reps focuses on strength. 12 to 20 is endurance and is also useful for hypertrophy. So yeah, it's just kind of funny that that rep range is for functional hypertrophy, where people want some strength, they want some speed without building too much muscle building. Yeah, there it is again, right there. Boom. So yeah, it's just kind of funny on what we end up seeing. These people that don't understand the rep ranges. What is another one that says rep ranges is about 8 to 12 per set seem to be a sweet spot for building muscle. And again, it's all dependent. There's a lot of different variables. So you can't just say this is the end all be all of hypertrophy, because there's so many different variables that come into play. And especially when you have studies that show, the 8 to 12 repetitions, and then you have, 15 to 20 or 20 repetitions, and that they have similar results. Sometimes some are better than others. It just shows that there are more ways to skin a cat than just that one, is what it comes down to. So yeah, it's just let's see what this one ends up saying. There was a study here. My internet is going to work. So 4 reps versus 8 reps versus 12 reps for strength and hypertrophy. 42 physically active people, but not resistance trained men. There was control group of 4, 8, and 12 reps. 3 sets of 10 reps with 60% 1 rep max load per session, while the second week involved 3 sets of 8 reps with 70% of the 1 rep max. So in other words, they did a little progressive overload thing, which is good. And then the third week, specifically, the third week involved 4 group trainings with 5 sets of 3 repetitions with a 90% 1 rep max, and group 8 with 3 sets of 6 reps with 80% of 1 rep max. Okay, so anyway, blah, 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 blah. Where is it? Too many studies look at it. It was found that the pectoralis major, the chest volume, increased similarly in all 3 training groups, while bench press strength was similar between the 4 and 8 group, and both greater than the 12 group. For this study, 4, 8, and 12 reps compared for hypertrophy, while 12 reps are notably less effective for strength than 4 and 8 reps. So, yeah, it ends up that the 12 repetitions is better than the 4 and the 8 because 4 and 8 does more for strength according to the study. So, yeah, it's just kind of interesting in how people will get onto social media, and that's their whole thing. You know, he's a fitness trainer. He's trying to sell programs. He's trying to remain relevant and have content that's new and refreshing and you know, controversial because controversy sells. So by saying, you know, well, you only need to do 4 to 8 repetitions appeals to people because they want the muscle, but they don't want to spend a lot of time. In other words, you want the results, but you don't want to put in the work. So it's great when somebody says, well, you can get hypertrophy from 4 to 8 repetitions. You just need to keep adding more weight once you get to 8 reps. Thinking that it's a never-ending cycle of endless hypertrophy, and that's not how it works. Because eventually you're going to cap out. So, and then even just going, if you cap out doing 4 to 8, I promise you that if you do 8 to 12 or 8 to 15 repetitions, you'll get into an area that is eye-opening and you'll experience more hypertrophy. Granted, everything else is the same. So, you know, nutrition and so on and so forth. So anyway, yeah, it's just kind of funny that, talking about rep ranges. Let's see, where's another one? For hypertrophy, that lower reps, 5 or fewer, are less efficient for stimulating growth as they gear more towards strength, which is true. There's another study from New York, had trained men perform 3 sets per exercise per session and found muscle growth outcomes were largely better when performing 8 to 12 repetitions to failure as per opposed to 2 to 4 reps to failure per set. Imagine that. What are the odds? 2014 study found performing 7 sets of 3 reps to failure was similarly effective for hypertrophy outcomes versus 3 sets of 10 reps to failure. And again, it also depends on the muscles that are being exercised. That's another thing, another variable that comes into play. There are some exercises that, or muscles that respond better to lower repetitions than others. So yeah, that's a whole different thing there. There was another study, reps between 6 and 35 are likely similarly effective for hypertrophy per set. In another 2015 study, found men trained performing 3 sets per exercise. Hypertrophy outcomes were similar training between 8 and 12 repetitions to failure and 25 to 35 sets to failure. So again, you're going to use a little bit of a lighter weight, but you're going to do more repetitions, but you're still going to get some hypertrophy off that. So really, you know, and what I found is I'm not going to say just do 8 to 12 repetitions and that's the best. You know, for general fitness, for general strength, general hypertrophy and stuff, for the average person, I would do 6 to 12 repetitions because that gives you a good balance. But if you're really focused and you're striving to build muscle, the rabbit hole goes a lot deeper. And again, changing up the angle in which you exercise that muscle. So there's a difference between exercising like this with your hands out like this when doing curls versus doing hammer curls versus doing reverse, which is, you know, going to get your brachialis, you know, a little bit more, but you're still going to have an effect on your bicep. All those things are working cables versus dumbbells because you get constant pressure on or tension on the muscle, and working it at different angles or getting in a stretched position. So when you do like Bayesian curls and you have that constant pressure, which is pulling that muscle, then you're going to, there's some studies showing that in that long lengthened position, you're going to get some more hypertrophy. So there's a lot of different variables that come into play when we're talking about hypertrophy and rep ranges. And again, it depends on the exercises. So if you're doing like bench and your squats, If you do the lower repetitions, you're going to get stronger. Okay, you won't get as much hypertrophy as if you do 8 to 12 repetitions. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and there's so many different variables that come into play with this. So basically, I would say you can experience hypertrophy of anything from 8 to 35 repetitions. I think the highest I ever did was like 40 repetitions, and that just, if you want to kill your arms or whatever muscle group, yeah, lower the weight and just go to failure and go to town and do 30, 40 reps. But somewhere within that range of 3 to 5 sets per muscle group, and you're looking at anywhere from, I would say, 8 to 30 repetitions, you can bounce between the lower side of that or the higher side of that, and you will still get a good muscle building response with all things being equal. So yeah, when you start getting into the 4 to 8, you're gonna in those lower rep ranges, you're going to get more strength gains, is what studies show. When you get up to 8, yeah, you're going to get in a little bit of hypertrophy. But when you start getting into the 10 to 12 to 15 and 20, you're going to experience a little bit more. At least that's what I've seen in my experience. So a lot of these people, it's interesting because what they'll end up doing is exercising, and whatever results they get, they think that's the answer to everything. And so they've got these blinders on, and it's like, well, this worked for me, so this is the only thing that can work for everybody else. And that's not the case. There was a guy that I talked with when I was living in Hawaii, and he swore up and down that high repetitions would not get you hypertrophy. And he didn't have any studies to prove that. And I'm just, oh, really, really, really? And so we got talking, and he was a chatty Cathy. Definitely a smaller guy. I think his biceps were as big as my forearms, maybe. And he's talking all this game about hypertrophy and how anything higher than what did he say, like 10? Is he like 10 or 12 repetitions was worthless and everything? And then he asked me what I was doing. Well, at that time I was on my kick of doing 25 to 30 repetitions. I said, yeah, I've experienced some good gains. Nutrition is good, recovery is good, but yeah, I'm doing 3 to 5 sets, and I'm doing 25 to 30, 20 to 30 reps. And he's just like, I said, yeah. I said, it was a real game changer to start to get into those higher repetitions. I quoted a couple of studies. I said, check out these, pulled it up on my phone and showed him. And I said, check these out, read them. Don't take my word for it. And the other thing that comes into play is that something that works for one person might not work well for another person. So when you see shitless influencers, fitness influencers saying you must do this exercise and you will get big, maybe, there are some exercises that I respond great to when it comes to working certain muscles. And it's like, wow, this is my go-to exercise for this. But other people, they don't experience it that much. As a matter of fact, there was even a video that I watched with Dr. Mike Israetel, and he was talking about, he was working out with this big bodybuilder dude, and the big bodybuilder dude has obviously had a lot more muscle than him, was saying, hey, do this exercise, and Mike was doing the exercise, and he's like, yeah, I'm not feeling it like you do. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not discounting or disproving what bodybuilder guy was doing. He was experiencing a real good stretch in the exercise that he was doing, but Mike wasn't experiencing the same thing, and that's okay. What we need, there's exercises that I do now that I tried to do in the past early on that I just didn't get anything out of it. And so maybe there's something to be said with getting a good foundation of doing the basics and then exploring into different areas of different angles and different exercises. And maybe your body will respond to that exercise more favorably now than it did in the past. At least that's what I experienced. I'm not saying that's going to be the case for everybody. Conversely, It could be the same way. You could have some exercise that you did early on that you were like, damn, this is killing it. This is rocking it. And then as you progress on with your fitness journey and you find out, yeah, this exercise just isn't really doing it for me as much. And then you stumble and you try some other exercise and hey, this one I'm getting a real good response to. There's also the case of maybe you're getting used to doing an exercise and maybe changing up and putting different stuff into the mix, changing the angle in which you do the exercise, the amount of time and tension, maybe the time duration of the repetition, maybe the explosiveness, maybe you focus on the contraction of the muscle while you're doing that repetition versus just trying to throw the weight up. That can come into play as well. And that makes a huge difference as well. It's interesting because when I've been working out and when I stumbled across some information that said, hey, slow down, do an explosive movement like in a chest press, and then contract the pecs as hard as you can for 1 to 2 seconds, and then do like a 4 to 6 second slow negative and really get that stretch in those pecs. When I latched on to that, that was a game changer for me because I realized that in a lot of what I used to do in the past for working chest is I didn't concentrate on contracting that pectoralis major. So what I was doing was getting real good tricep workout, and I was getting some secondary workout on my chest, whereas with a lower weight, what I'm able to do is I'm able to push, get some explosiveness in there, but then I can really squeeze that chest and get that really just as hard as I can. And as I go down, I keep that contraction of the pec muscle and then get a real good solid stretch at the bottom. That's usually while I have a pad on the back to give me a couple of inches of more movement and stretch. That was a game changer as well. So, there's just so much that's involved in hypertrophy and strength training or in power training. There's just so much that comes into those areas that if you think that you know everything and you make a blanket statement like that guy said, only do 4 to 8 repetitions, I know you're a wackadoo. And I know that you have no clue about what you're talking about. You have a small clue. It's like you're looking through a keyhole and you're only seeing this little bit of the area of looking through that hole. But when you open that door, there's a whole big world out there, and you're just looking. You just have these binoculars, and you're just looking at that one thing. You're missing the forest through the trees. You're just looking at one tree, and you're missing the whole forest, and that's what it comes down to. So anyway, with that being said, I'm going to take off. I got to finish my protein drink this morning and doing chest and back today. So yeah, I just want to talk about this and the information and how skinny guys telling you how to build muscle. That's a red flag there. And then the other red flag of, him trying to do a bicep curl on a leg curl machine when he's in a fully equipped massive gym that has appropriate bicep equipment. It shows you he's just trying to be different to get views, which he does because clueless people will look at him and say, oh yeah, this sounds good, that sounds good. But he doesn't look good according to the information he's putting out. Here's how you build muscle. And I'm like, where's the muscle? If you have muscle now, I would hate to see you what you were before because you must have been like, here's my arm. Yeah, it's just absolutely crazy. So be careful who you listen to on the interwebs, including me. Look at studies, look at meta-analysis for hypertrophy and strength training, power training, all of those things. And as you go through there, you can find some commonalities. The commonalities for hypertrophy is going to be working to failure or close to it. Is going to be your nutrition, increased protein, good rest between your workouts so that you can properly recover. And I would say just starting out for the beginner, I would do 3 days a week. And then I would also do 75 minutes to 150 minutes of cardio for your heart health. And then I would do 2 to 3 sets per muscle group. And yeah, just run with that for a while. Do that for 6 to 8 months in the year and see how you're doing. Incorporate some progressive overload where you add, some weight. Let's say if you're doing 100 pounds on bench and, just an arbitrary number. And then the next week, maybe add on 5 pounds, maybe add on 10 pounds. and then do that for a couple of weeks. There's no reason to go crazy on the amount of progressive overload if you're the average person. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with being the average person who wants to get healthy and doesn't want to look like a bodybuilder. Just follow the simple steps. Continuity is the key of continually doing and showing up and doing the exercises. That's what's important. So yeah, when somebody says they know and they have the end all be all of only do 4 to 8 repetitions, you know that they're selling you a wolf ticket and they are clueless. So, and especially if they don't have any muscle and they're telling you how to build muscle. Okay, so that's going to be it. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Check me out on YouTube, The Varied Life, where I do hobby, technology stuff, and a little bit of fitness. This is just what got up my nose today. And yeah, that's going to be it. So we'll see you on the next video. Peace.